After decades of crime declining in LA, we are seeing it increase. Property crimes, violent crimes. Why?
Well, I think it's happened up and down California. 5 of the 10 cities that had the largest per capita crime increases were in California. I think some of that has been well-intentioned criminal justice reforms where we haven't had the social safety net to catch people as they're getting out of jail and prison and they're winding up addicted to drugs, they're living on our streets. In fact, most of the uptick in, for instance, property crime is car break-ins, which is people, in my mind, that are addicted, who are struggling with that addiction, breaking into cars, stealing property to feed that addiction. But the good news is the last 6 months, we've seen no increase. So the work that we did after 2 years, and to put this in perspective, it's still the 5th or 6th safest year in 50 years. So relatively very low crime levels. But that uptick that we saw that was troubling, we immediately put resources into. In the last 6 months, we haven't seen any increase in crime. We expect that to hold this year.
Some of the recent stories I've done regarding crime in Los Angeles, Angelenos are concerned. They say they're even worried. Should we be worried?
A strong majority of Angelenos feel safe or extremely safe in their neighborhoods. But that doesn't satisfy me. There are still certain zip codes that even at the lowest crime year, you'd hear gunshots, too many homicides. So we're expanding something called the Community Safety Partnership, where we don't just put a police officer in your neighborhood for a year or two. They will volunteer for up to 5 years of service. So they get to know you, they get to know your family. In Watts, we did this, and we had a whole year with no homicides in Watts, and we've seen huge reductions in crime.
Transportation, traffic, roads, of what you've paved, incredible Herculean effort, yet I've got to tell you, there's still potholes everywhere. Why is that?
It's a huge city. We're getting rid of all of our D and F rated streets. We're pretty much average now in C. And now that we passed Measure M, which was this historic transportation initiative, that wasn't just about building a public transportation system and 15 new lines or extended lines for light rail. It's also about paving our streets, and we'll be able to break those record-breaking numbers of the last 3 years. So call in those potholes. Potholes are different than repaving. We can get them done in less than 3 days.
You touched on transportation. The Expo line, amazing. Getting folks from downtown to Santa Monica and back. I got to tell you one thing that's driving me crazy. The traffic seems to be getting worse. Because the Expo line runs across surface streets and there are no bridges, it backs the traffic up for blocks and blocks. And it seems like we fixed one thing, but we caused another problem.
Well, you need a system that interconnects. And I think it's kind of like the lottery now. If you're lucky enough to live right by a stop and work relatively close, it is the most amazing thing. During the Rams games, we had, over 25% of the people going to those games at the Coliseum going on the Expo line in public transit. But the next piece is to make sure that it gets you everywhere you want to go. Get through the Sepulveda Pass with public transportation, throughout the San Fernando Valley, and then throughout the Southland. When we talk about 15 rail lines, that finally will have an interconnected system that works well together.
Jobs in Los Angeles. I talk to the average folks on the street and they say, we're hurting. We can't find a job or a good paying job.
I'm very proud that we've gone from 13% unemployment to 5%, and during my administration cut it by more than half. It's faster paced than anywhere else in the country. We've tripled the number of summer youth jobs. We're helping people who are veterans get 10,000 jobs and helping folks coming out of the criminal justice system to get jobs. But I never rest on those laurels, and I always say, as you point out, there are people out there still in zip codes where it's tough, where unemployment is double digits. Those at the top who are in the creative class are doing extremely well. The service class has been ballooning. But the good thing that we did was pass a raise in the minimum wage, which was very important to me to help those folks at the bottom have a little bit better chance and a little better quality of life too.
Real estate development in this city. Wow, I drive around downtown LA, that skyline, this mixed use. West LA is being built out, Hollywood is being built out. However, on the other hand, you've heard your critics say, look, too much gridlock, too much pollution, too much noise, nowhere to park. People have even criticized you saying, you've got these real estate developers in your pocket.
Well, I always say the question isn't between whether we develop or not, whether we densify or not. It's whether we plan for growth or don't plan for growth. It's my responsibility as mayor to plan for the future and to make sure there's clear rules, update our community plans, make sure that we have density where it's appropriate, especially where we're making huge investments in our transit corridors. If we don't do that, it will still cram into your neighborhood. You might not see a new development, but you wonder, why isn't there parking space on the street anymore? Well, it's because there's 10 people living in that home where only 3 or 4 were before.
Well, let me say though, I'm seeing the development though, but do we have the plans?
Absolutely. We have now a 6-year plan to update every single one of our 35 community plans. In fact, we've done 4 of them just in the last few years. And to me, that's the blueprint of the future. We've got to modernize our city just as the world is modernizing. And absolutely, I hope one of my strong legacies will be that I left behind the blueprints for the next 2 or 3 decades for every corner of this city. And we're going to be able to do that in a pace we've never seen before the next 6 years.
So far, what is your strongest legacy?
You know, I govern the way I live in the city. I want to be here 20 years from now with my daughter and hopefully one day my grandkids, my wife, and see what did we leave behind. To me, that's a transportation and infrastructure legacy and a strong economy. And then third, a city hall that listens.
I read a statement regarding immigration that you recently released. I want to read part of it. We need to dissect this a little bit together. You said, quote, "You are against the mass deportations. We shouldn't turn our backs on refugees and children, or deny asylum seekers the right to see a judge, show indifference to suffering." You went on to say you'll do everything in your power to protect and defend the rights of all Angelenos whose families may be unjustly affected by these orders. Well, basically, according to that, your critics are saying you're breaking the law, you're forming a sanctuary city, you're going against the federal government.
I'm not breaking any law. I'm defending our people. I'm defending our economy. I'm defending our families, defending our police. I want to fix this problem as much as anybody does in this country. We want to have a pathway to success. To me, the federal government needs to enforce federal laws. That's clear. But there's no way that 12 million people, you can enforce the law against unlawful entry to this country against all of them. So why don't we find pathways towards citizenship, pathways towards paying more taxes, pathways towards graduating more college students? That seems to be the smart way forward, and a majority of Americans I know agree with us.
I have one final question for you. You know I'm a tough investigative reporter, so I don't mean to put you in the hot seat, but I must ask you this. I'm going to ask you to answer it honestly. If you had the chance to be California's next governor or U.S. Senator, possibly a path to the White House, or you could be the next Jack Nicholson or Jim Carrey, given your comedic and your acting abilities, which would you choose? And be honest.
For personal satisfaction, the latter. I've always loved the arts and performance, but you know, these days, in these dark times, I have to do the first. I think as long as I can continue to make a difference and impact people's lives, people are looking for leaders to take them to uncomfortable places. Don't get me wrong, Jack Nicholson's taken us to some uncomfortable places. Jim Carrey has made us laugh. But I think the more I do this job, the more I realize that the emotions run even deeper. The stories are not made up, they're real. And the best narratives are living right here amongst us in LA.
So I take that as we'll probably see a future political career continue, but also maybe some improv or taking your show on the road to Vegas on the weekend.
If I can pull a guest starring gig after I retire, I'd be happy to. So all the agents out there, I'll be available in a decade or two.